What's up, YouTube? Today, we're going to have a little discussion today. Also, it's kind of a list. Today, we are going to clear up 3 common misconceptions when it comes to yo-yo stuff. So, 3 common misconceptions when it comes to yo-yo and things associated with yo-yo, bearings, strings, etc. Let's start with number 1. Bearing misconceptions. So, every yo-yo, regardless of whether it's $100, well, not every yo-yo, but every unresponsive yo-yo, regardless of whether it's $100, $50, or $140, is going to come with a bearing. Now, generally, most yo-yo bearings are pretty good. However, regardless of whether you spend $5 on a yo-yo or $100 on a yo-yo, if you get crap in that bearing, it's going to get dirty, it's going to get loud, and it'll probably become responsive. So I have cats. I talk about this all the time. My cats can make a dirty bearing out of a bearing that comes in a $150 or $140 yo-yo just as quickly as they can a $10 or $20 yo-yo as well. All bearings aren't created equal necessarily either, but once you get to a certain threshold, it's kind of all the same. The most budget yo-yos will often come with cheaper bearings. A lot of times you'll see like the budget magic yo-yos. You can kind of tell they're not as high quality of a bearing as what would come in a more expensive $40, $50 magic yo-yo. That's just an example there. You can get, even higher end bearings, ceramic, etc., etc. But for the most part, a bearing is a bearing. Don't focus too much on them. Don't fuss with them too much. And for the most part, they will be fine. The one thing that I see particularly newer players doing is fussing with their bearings or fussing over the bearings very much. In two different ways. One, they buy a cheap yo-yo or just a moderately expensive yo-yo, like a Yo-Yo Factory Shutter or something like that. And they immediately want to upgrade the bearing. They think it's going to upgrade their yo-yo entirely. So, they buy a $40 yo-yo and then they're like, oh, I got to put this $20 bearing into my $40 yo-yo. You're probably really not going to upgrade that yo-yo very much buying a ceramic bearing. And, while ceramic bearings are nice, I'm not going to say they're not nice. It's kind of overkill and sort of a waste of time, waste of money. What you should do, if you're intending on buying a new bearing, is just buy some extra bearings. They come in bulk packs. You can get them from Top Yo. Now they sell theirs. Top Yo's are great. I believe there's still some at YoYo Best Buy. I know JD had a bunch made, and he's not putting up new yo-yos so much, but I know he's still got a lot of accessories. That's usually what I would do, is just buy the Buddha bearings from YoYo Best Buy. But there's tons of ways to get decent bearings. You can get big packs of them on Yo-Yo Expert, etc., etc. Instead of spending $20 on a single expensive bearing or something like that, or gold-plated, buy a package of bulk decent bearings. Sometimes you can get the Yo-Yo Factory ones pretty cheap. I've always got a few extras, and I think that it's very important because, number 2, bearings can go bad. You can get a cheap yo-yo with a cheap bearing. That bearing might be fantastic and last forever. It might get dirty and might just need clean. That's fine. We'll talk about that in a sec. Or you just could get a bum bearing. It happens. I've had hundreds of yo-yos. I have hundreds of yo-yos. Occasionally you get a bum bearing. It's not a big deal. It happens. There's a lot of these things in a lot of different yo-yos. It just happens regardless of how often you clean it, what you clean it with, if you lube it, if you don't lube it. Sometimes it's just a bum bearing. Just gotta throw it away, replace it. That's all there is to it. It happens. And it happens with every manufacturer, with every... it just happens. That's why you see a lot of guys just, if you go back to the manufacturer, hey, my bearing is crappy, they'll just send you a new one. I would recommend doing that if you get a bum bearing. If not, have a couple extras, because sometimes a bearing will just go after a little while. No rhyme or reason to it. Maybe it had some stuff in it. Maybe there was an imperfection that finally just made it go. It happens. So there's really no magic to yo-yo bearings, is basically what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of misconceptions that there's some kind of magic, or gold-plated means something else, or, ceramic. Does the bearing spin? Does it spin freely? Don't mess with it. You can choose to lube it or not lube it if you want. It's up to you. I like to lube my bearings, keeps them nice and quiet. But again, I would only take out and lube a bearing after I've needed to clean it. If the bearing has been fine since it's been in the yo-yo and it's been spinning good, I wouldn't clean it, I wouldn't lube it, I wouldn't fuss with it until it's necessary. So that's the first common misconception, is that people want to fudge with their bearings or something. Not a great idea. Second common misconception is yo-yo string. So I use Zipline Strings. I'm endorsed by Zipline Strings. I'm on the team. I love Zipline Strings. They make strings of the color that I like, the colors that I like and request, and it's been a great partnership for me forever. It's a very boutique string. They end up being about $1-ish a string, depending on how you buy them and in what packages you buy them. They last a really long time. I like that they last a long time, because it cuts down on waste. I have a lot of yo-yos. I need a lot of yo-yo string. If I'm not going through one yo-yo string every 20, 30, 40 minutes or whatever, or every time I pick up a yo-yo, that's better for the environment, because this stuff is plastic and it doesn't really, it's not really biodegradable. So for me, a longer lasting yo-yo string, and I've talked to Will Prater, who does the Markmont strings as well, it's just more environmentally conscious. Now, that being said, there's nothing wrong with bulk string. If you prefer, say you've only got 5-6 yo-yos, and that's what most people's collections tend to be. You know, if you want to put a fresh string on every day whenever you're going to play a yo-yo, that's up to you. That's perfectly fine if that's what you want to do. Now, I think you're creating a little bit too much waste. I would hope that you would be able to recycle those at some point, because they are polyester for the most part, if that's what you're using, or nylon. So I would hope that you would recycle those, or make a string ball out of them or something. But that's up to you. There's no better or worse way to do it. Like I said, I believe the environmentally conscious route is to use a longer lasting string. That's just what I believe and what I would do. But if you're gonna recycle it, or if you're gonna make a string ball or whatever, something that's not, damaging to the environment. Say you're gonna make a string ball, then end up recycling that at some point, or just see how big you can make it. Maybe you can make it so big it fills your garage. I wouldn't recommend that, but it's up to you. So it's not that there's no difference. There certainly is, but it's not better to do it one way versus another necessarily, or it's not going to make you a better player to use more expensive string. Now, it might save your hands a little bit, might save your fingers, especially when it gets cold outside. I tend to get, my hands tend to get dry and cracked, and that hurts. And the Zipline strings are softer, and they feel softer. And so particularly in the winter time, I feel like that saves my hands a lot. But at the same time, if you're putting a fresh kitty string on every time, those aren't necessarily rough, terrible strings that are going to rip your hands apart. Now, there's some bulk string that comes that I've had, just show up on a yo-yo, and I've just thrown it and oh my god, this string feels like sandpaper, and then I have a cut, and I'm really upset with myself for not changing the string first. But, I would suggest pick a kind of string that you like, that you enjoy, that feels right to you, that has the longevity that you want, and just stick with it. That's going to be the best. The other yo-yo string misconception is that everybody has to have a long string. This isn't so much a misconception anymore as it was a couple of years ago, maybe when I started. Everybody was, on the super long string kick, and I feel like that's just not the case anymore. Everybody plays a lot faster and a lot cleaner now, and I feel like the yo-yo routines have become a lot cleaner at contests and stuff, and those guys have cut down their string. Even Evan Nagao has cut his string down. Although Evan is now going to do whatever he wants, because he's not going to compete anymore. He's just going to hang out with us, which is sweet. And, a lot of the routines cleaned up real fast, and the level of competition jumped real fast, because it sort of became the norm to sort of cut your string down, and everybody got cleaner. All the routines got nice and smooth and fast, and it's been way less of a thing. But there was a point in time where long string was the thing. You can get extra tall strings. That's why extra tall or extra long strings exist, because people like that. If you like extra long string, by all means, enjoy it. But don't think, particularly as a beginner, oh, I gotta use full-length kitty, or I gotta get used to full-length zip lines, or I gotta get used to full-length, tall strings, or whatever. Use what's comfortable. Shorten your string, especially if you don't want to bash your yo-yo off the ground very often. Use shorter string. I use yo-yo string maybe just a little bit above my belly button, right below my sternum. And quite frankly, I feel like that works out for me. I don't ding my yo-yos very often. And I'm not that tall of a guy. I'm under 6 feet tall. But, use what's comfortable to you. There's no special string length that you need to use. The last common misconception is that you need an expensive yo-yo. You may want an expensive yo-yo. This is a Thai Vader. This isn't actually that expensive considering titanium, but some titanium yo-yos can be really expensive. But the Thai Vader is about $140. It's phenomenal. It feels great. It plays great. It's a good value, really, for $140 because it's made of titanium. But do you need a $140 yo-yo to play yo-yo and enjoy yo-yo? No. Now, do you maybe need something better than $10 or $15? Yeah, I would say you do. You can only get so far with a $5 Butterfly XT. Or, you can only get so far with, like, some of the more budget Magic yo-yos. Now, they're fine. There's some diamonds in the rough. Those usually end up being $20, $25 though now, particularly, especially if you want to splash or something. Like, even the N12, I think, is $20 on Amazon, or maybe 25. Like, if you want to order it from China, yeah, maybe you can save a few bucks, but I mean, really, you're splitting hairs there, and you're going to wait a month for it to show up. Anyway, I would say that sort of the sweet spot of a yo-yo that would be good, and you wouldn't necessarily need to upgrade or anything from there, would be somewhere around $50. Now, is a bimetal gonna be longer spinning, more stable, etc., etc.? And yes, and those cost a little bit more. Those start at about $75. So maybe, between $50 and $75, $50 to $100 maybe if you want a nice bimetal with a splash or something. But you don't need any of that stuff to become a good yo-yo player. You just don't. You don't need a $100 bimetal. You just certainly don't need a $150 bimetal. I don't think it will take you any further than a $45 shutter or a, $50 metalhead or $50 author. Review coming soon. It's just not going to take you any further. Now, you may like them. It may play a certain way. And, there may be increments of things that you like about it better. But is it going to play better and do more interesting tricks than your $45 Yo-Yo Factory or $50 Yo-Yo Factory? No, not particularly. It may look nicer. It may have a nicer finish. It may be smoother. But those are kind of the things you pay for, not necessarily performance, although you get some of that, particularly with bimetals. You're generally paying for color, finish, and smoothness, because somebody actually has to touch it and throw the yo-yo and check to see if it's smooth, as opposed to having a little bit of vibration. So that's the third common misconception, is that you would need an expensive yo-yo. You don't necessarily need an expensive yo-yo. Now, if you want expensive yo-yos, by all means, you'll be supporting generally small businesses and people within the yo-yo community who are, quite frankly, I've met most of them, they're great people. So if you want, don't feel bad about buying an expensive yo-yo. And expensive is, in the eye of the beholder. Usually $60 to $75, you can kind of get whatever you want, and that's generally where most yo-yos fall into play, between $50 and $75, depending on anodization, where it's machined, etc., etc. And if you want to buy expensive ones, you're generally supporting good people who will then put whatever profits back into the yo-yo community and back into making yo-yos, which is, of course, the point of all of this. But that's going to do it for me today, guys. Tell me, what do you think? Are there other common yo-yo misconceptions that you hear about, particularly from beginners? Tell me down in the comments. But thanks so much for watching, guys. Please make sure you like and subscribe. Cheers to you. I'll see you next time.